Welcome to ArtMind. Today we are learning the shape tools in Photoshop. The shape tools are located here and the shortcut is U. First I'm going to discuss the common options shared by all these tools, and for that I'm going to be using the ellipse shape tool. Here's how we use it. We click and drag, and here's our ellipse. To get rid of the transformation box, hit enter. We can also have it horizontally like so. Or if you want, we can also have a perfect circle. How do we do that? We press and hold Shift and then drag. If we want the circle to emerge from the center on where we clicked, we'll have to first click, press and hold Alt, and then Shift and drag. There's another way how you can create an ellipse. This method, however, is not limited to just ellipse. We can also use this method for all these other shapes. But what is the method? The method is we simply click on the canvas. Here you can choose the width and height of the ellipse. Since I want a perfect circle, I'll have both of them at 400 pixels. Here's another option called From Center. What happens when I check that? Well, to get this dialog box, we clicked exactly on this spot, right? So From Center will make sure that this spot will be the center of the circle. And quite rightly so. Also, the width is 400 pixels and the height is also 400 pixels. Let me just click once again and see what happens when I don't check From Center. The top of the circle will align here and the left side of the circle will align here. I'm gonna hit OK and find out if it's right. And it is. Now first we'll learn the properties under the shape mode. This is fill color. Then we are gonna take a look at this option which is called solid color. Under here you can select from all these groups of colors. I'll expand RGB and select blue. So now the circle is blue. Let's check out the gradient tab now. Again, we have groups of gradients saved here. I'm going to scroll down and expand purples. I like this one. Let's select that. And here's the preview of the gradient in full expansion. I'm going to try out and see how it looks in our shape. Looks nice. We can also customize the colors of the gradient however we want. If you want to change this pink color, you'll have to double click on this color stop. Choose the color of your liking. I'll select red. And we have red in the gradient. I'm going to try this out. So earlier we had a gradient from pink to sky blue, and now we have a gradient from red to sky blue. We can also change the opacity of the colors. Suppose I want to change the opacity of red. For that I'll have to click on the opacity stop for the red color and then reduce it over here. You can see how the red is fading in here, right? You can also reverse or flip the gradient colors, like now we have red on top and sky blue at the bottom, right? Now let's click on this. So red at the bottom and blue on top. I'm going to click it off so we have what we had before. We can also adjust the angle of the gradient. Like now we have it vertically from top to bottom, but we can also have it horizontally from left to right. I will simply put 0 over here and that will do the trick. Alternatively, you can also use this style to rotate the angle of the gradient. We can also adjust the distance of the color stops. This is how the gradient looks when the color stops are far apart. Let's grab this one and I'll pull it towards the red stop. So the blue is more dominant in the gradient now. Not only that, we can also add extra colors in the gradient. For that, we'll have to click anywhere down here. I'll just add one color. You can of course add more than one. By default, it has added white. I want to change that. So I'll double click on the color stop and have maybe green. We can specify the gradient style over here. Like now it's at linear, but we can choose from any of these. I'll just select radial to show you an example. You can of course try out the rest. All the other options work just as well with this radial style. For example, I'm going to make the red more dominant. And there we go. We can also increase or decrease the size of the gradient. We can do that over here. At present, the scale is at 100%, meaning the gradient will stretch from the endpoints of the object. And what is our object at hand? The circle, right? So the gradient at 100% scale is stretching from this endpoint to this endpoint. But what if I want to stretch it even further? I want the gradient stretched to maybe 200%. The gradient then should look something like this. I'm going to try it out and see it for myself. So here let's put 200 and there we go. If I bring in the strip, you can see that the gradients are matching. But what if I want to squeeze the gradient? So far as maybe 1%, will it really look like this? Let's find out. I'll enter 1 over here and there we go. This gradient is of course bigger because we had to fill this big circle, but the gradient is just the same with the two colors. Next we have align with layer, which I would instead recommend you to read as align with object. This option goes hand in hand with scale. But before I go into all this, I'll do a quick little thing. By the way, I'm using the rectangle shape tool this time. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to draw a big rectangle that covers the full height of the canvas. Then I'll draw a small one somewhere in the middle. I will need to duplicate these two, so I'll grab my move tool, which is V, press and hold Alt, then click and drag. Again Alt, then click and drag. Now I'll switch back to the shape tool, which is U. Let me quickly show you the shape layers that have been created. So this is rectangle 1 and this is copy of rectangle 1. This is rectangle 2 and this is copy of rectangle 2. So 4 shape layers for the 4 shapes. I'll click and select this rectangle. Then go to fill. I'll work with 100% scale and you can see that align with object is not checked. Yes, I'll read align with object, not layer. Or for your convenience, you can read align with object of the layer. Right now, it's not aligned with the object. But what is the gradient aligned with then? The gradient is aligned with the bounds of the canvas. Specifically these two bounds of the canvas because the gradients here run vertically. So instead of the gradient running from here to here, it's actually running from here to here. So kind of like these blocks. If we cut the section from here, we get this gradient. And we want to reduce the bounds from this to this. We do that by clicking over here. So let's try that. And you can immediately see the difference between these two, right? Here the gradient is limited just inside this, so it is more squeezed and dense, whereas this one has a broader limit. The same gradient stretches from here to here, and thus we have this less dense portion of the gradient. Now for these two shapes, both of them have the same bounds as the canvas, right? So with that logic, aligning with the object and aligning with the canvas will mean the same thing, right? Let's find out. I'm gonna go and select this one, and then align with object of the layer. So no change. There's another way how you can look at this option called align with object of the layer. So we have got these two strips of gradients. This is not aligned to the object of the layer, and this is aligned with the object of the layer. And this one is just for reference. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to click on this one and drag it down. We know that this gradient was not aligned with this object. That is why the gradient didn't change and conform to the bounds of this new shape. Now let's try the aligned one. I'm going to click and drag like before. And there you have it. The gradient now conforms to the bounds of the new changed shape. Next we're going to look at the pattern tab. Instead of gradient or color, it fills the shape with pattern. You can choose your patterns from here. Let's try this one. You can also expand one of these, like I'll use the trees group and then select maybe this one. We have the option down here to scale the size of the pattern. At 100% scale, this is our pattern here. I'm going to make it larger, let's say 400%, and you can see that the size has increased, right? We can also adjust the angle of the pattern. At 0° angle, the pattern is like so. Let's change it to maybe 50. And there you go. By the way, you can also use this dial to control the angle. You must have noticed this icon, which is the color picker. This is available for all these tabs, and if I click on it, it automatically takes me to this. You can see that currently we are on the pattern tab and this is still available. So I'm gonna click, pick a color, and as I will be clicking OK, this solid color tab will be activated. Why? Because we are using solid color over here. aren't we? And what does this tab do? It says no fill, nothing. I'm gonna click and we lost the fill. But don't you worry, the shape is still there. So if I grab the move tool, which the shortcut is V, I go and click over here where the shape was, and there we have it. We can also apply stroke to our shape. Right now the none option is selected, that's why there's no stroke. But as soon as I go to solid colors, there we go. You can choose the color you want. I'll select green. And as you might have noticed, all these tabs and options are exactly the same as that in the fill property. So this is our gradient. I'm gonna try this one. And last we have pattern. I'm gonna use this. And it looks nice. For the next option, I'm gonna draw a circle first. You can see that it has both fill and stroke. And here's the shape layer for it. There's a cool nifty trick to change the fill color. All you need to do is go to the thumbnail of the shape layer and double click on it. I'll choose a color, green maybe, and there you have it. You can also adjust the stroke width. Right now we have the stroke width at 8 pixels, which is very thin, right? I'm gonna go and increase that. To show you the next option, I'm gonna use the line shape tool. We just click and drag, like so. Then we go to stroke style. All these options are also inside here, so let's click on more options. First, we're going to take a look at dashed line. Let's click on it, and there we have a dashed line or stroke. But what are these numbers? We have 4 units of dash, which is reflected over here, and 2 units of gap, which is this over here. This pattern is then repeated along the stroke. We can of course control these numbers. Maybe I want a bigger gap. I'll have 4 on gap as well. Let's see how that looks. So the dash is 4 units and the gap is also 4 units. And then the pattern repeats. But let's say I want to make this pattern more complex. Instead of just 1 pair of dash and gap, I want to have 3 pairs of dash and gap in the pattern. I'm going to quickly go in and fill in the boxes and then explain what I'm doing. I'm going to have 8 for this dash, 2 for this gap, 3 for the last dash, and 2 for the gap. And this is how the stroke looks now. So this is 4 units, the gap is also 4 units, then we have a dash of 8 and gap of 2, followed by a dash of 3 and a gap of 2, and then the pattern repeats itself. For the next stroke properties, I'm going to use the rectangle shape tool. I'll go to stroke style, then more options. Let's take a look at corners. First, we'll test round, and that gives round corners. Next, we have bevel, which is going to give us squared corners. Last, we have miter, which is going to produce pointy corners. For the next option, I'm going to use the line shape tool. Let's take a look at caps. Here's the round cap, which is going to make the ends rounded. The square cap makes the ends square. The butt cap is kind of like square, but here the end is going to touch the anchors. For the next option, I've used the rectangle shape tool. We go to stroke style, then more options, and then we have align. To be more specific, align the stroke with the path. Here the green section is the stroke and the red line is the path. First we're going to try outside, meaning the stroke is going to be outside the path. So here's the stroke outside and the path inside. Next we're going to look at inside. Here the stroke will be inside and the path outside. So stroke inside, path outside. Next we have center, which is going to align the stroke at the center of the path. We can also make custom presets like so. And I'm just going to randomly change the settings over here to just give you an example. I'm going to change the stroke alignment to outside, change the corners to round, and then check dashed line. Enter the numbers however I wish. And then when I'm happy with the style, I can go and hit save. You keep an eye over here as I hit save. So our stroke style preset has been saved. Now anytime I can go back to some other preset like this one and then revert back to the one we just created. To explain the next set of options, I'm going to use the polygon shape tool. We have the width option here. I'm going to change that to 800 pixels. So the polygon is now 800 pixels wide. I'm going to have the height at 400 pixels and this is the height. Next, I'm going to explain path operations. First, we have new layer. And let me quickly bring up the layers panel now. So there's nothing in the layers panel except this black background that I've created. I'm going to draw a circle. And you can see that an ellipse shape layer has been created corresponding to that. What if I want to create another ellipse or circle? Will it be created on the same shape layer? Let's find out. I'm going to have the second shape overlapping the first shape. But even then, you can see that it has been created on a new shape layer, right? I'm going to try another shape. And it is too on its own new shape layer. Next, I'm going to try combine shapes. But you can see that how the icon is still at new layer. That's because we need at least one shape layer to begin the combining process, right? So let's just do that. I'm going to create a shape. And once the shape layer is created, you can see that the combine shape option is active. Now if I go in and draw new shapes, all of them are going to be in this one shape layer. Let's draw another shape. And there you go. While the combine shapes option is still active, we can draw as many shapes as we want, and they're all going to be on the same shape layer. Now there's another interesting rule of the combine shapes path operation, and to demonstrate that, I'm using both fill and stroke. I'm going to click on path operations and then combine shapes. Let's draw an ellipse. And then another one on top of it. I hope you can see the intersecting paths inside, but quite interestingly, there's no blue stroke on them. This is because we have used combine shapes. So if I press enter, we get a clean shape without any intersecting stroke. But the paths are still there inside. So if we press enter, there we go. Next we have subtract front shape. Let's draw a shape first. So now if I draw any shape, it's gonna be on top of this shape, right? Or in other words, in front of this shape. I'm gonna draw and overlap the shape too. So subtract front shape is basically gonna subtract the front shape from the first shape. So this entire region is gonna be deleted. I'm gonna let go of the mouse button. And there we go. Now I'm gonna show you what happens when we apply subtract front shape on a single shape. But before that, I would like you to consider this empty canvas as 0. By empty, I mean there's no shape yet. So the value is 0, right? Now let's draw a shape. Now let's assign a value for this shape. Let's call it A. And Photoshop considers this rest of this space outside A as -A. Now let's go ahead and apply subtract front shape on this single shape. And theoretically, what should be the result? 0 minus A is equal to -A, right? And what is -A? This region. So let's see if we get that. We go to path operations, subtract front shape, and there we go. Next we have intersect shape areas. I'm going to draw a shape first and then draw another overlapping this one. Now you can see that this is the intersecting region, right? And when I let go of the mouse, this is what we are left with. Next, we're going to look at exclude overlapping shapes. Let's draw a shape. I'm going to overlap the second one. This is the overlapping region, and when I let go of the mouse, this should be excluded. Last, we're going to take a look at merge shape components, which is now grayed out. To activate it, you have to do a couple of things. First, you have to use any of these options. I'm going to use combine shapes, draw the first shape, and then draw the second one. I'm going to hit enter to show you what we have here. You can see that we have both fill and stroke around the shape. That's alright, but when I hit enter again, we can see the intersecting paths are still there. Here comes the use of merge shape components. It's gonna get rid of all the paths that are no more needed. So I'm gonna head over to path operations. And now you can see that merge shape components is active. I'm gonna click on that, so these are deleted. Just click on yes. And they are deleted. So if I hit enter again, we have the clear view of the shape with the stroke. I'm gonna hit enter once more to bring back the paths, and they are really gone from here. Next we have path alignment. To explain that, I've already created 3 rectangles on the same shape layer by using combined shapes, because path alignment only works when the shapes are on the same shape layer. Now suppose I want this shape to align to the left edge of the canvas. How do I do that? First we'll have to select the shape layer. Then take the cursor, press and hold Ctrl, and then click on the shape. Then we go to path alignment. Next we'll have to tell Photoshop what we want to align to. We want to align the shape with the canvas. So we go to Align To, and then select Canvas. Now we'll have to click Align Left Edges. And there you have it. We can also align to the right edge of the canvas by clicking on this. The horizontal middle of the canvas. Here we can go to the top edge of the canvas, the bottom edge, and the vertical middle of the canvas. We can also align the shapes to a selection. I want all of them to be selected. So I'll take the cursor, press and hold Ctrl, click, press and hold Shift, and select the rest of the 2. So this is our selection area. You might as well could have selected just these 2. So this region would have been your selection. So anyway, I'm gonna go to path alignment. And what I want to achieve is that I want all these 3 shapes to align to the left edge of the selection. So we go to Align To, and then click on Selection. Now we just click on Align Left Edges. And we got what we wanted. I'm gonna undo that, and then align to the middle of the selection. I'll go back, and then align to the right edge of the selection. You get the idea, and you can try these out on your own. I've laid out these 3 shapes on the same layer by using the polygon tool. First, what I want to do is that I want to equally space out all the left edges. For that, first I'll select the shape layer. Take the cursor, press and hold Ctrl, and then click on the first shape. Press and hold Shift, and then select the rest of the 2 shapes. Then we go to path alignment. Distribute left edges. So this distance is now equal to this distance. I'm gonna undo that. And now I want to equally space out the horizontal middle points of the shape. And we have it. This distance is now equal to this distance. I'm gonna undo again. And now I want to distribute the right edges equally. So these are now equal distances. Similarly, you can figure out these options on your own. Next, I'll show you how to distribute the spaces equally. By that I mean I want these horizontal gaps to be the same. For that, we'll have to click on this button. So both of them have the same distance. You try and figure out the vertical spacing on your own. Up next, we have path arrangement, but to explain that, I'll first have to show you a couple of things. You can see that these are the 3 shapes that I've drawn with the ellipse tool, rectangle tool, and the polygon tool. I've drawn the circle first, so it is at the bottom, then the rectangle, which is on top of the circle, and last the polygon, which is on top of both the 2 shapes. I'll click on the shape layer, and then select the rectangle. Next, I'll go to path operations and subtract front shape. Now since the rectangle is on top of the circle or in front of the circle, it should be able to subtract from the circle, right? So I'll grab the rectangle and move it over the circle, and it does take away this part of the circle. But the rectangle is below the polygon, or in other words, it is not in front of the polygon. So if I take the rectangle, you can see that there is no subtraction. I did all of these to prove that the shapes are indeed in this order. I'm gonna undo the entire thing and then change the order of the shapes. Suppose this time I want this rectangle to be on top of these two shapes. First I'll have to select it, then go to Path Arrangement. Now I can do either of these two since I have only one object to skip. What do I mean by that? Bring shape forward skips the shape forward one step at a time. Imagine if I had the circle selected instead and then I clicked Bring shape forward, it would bring the circle one step forward above the rectangle, and clicking on Bring shape forward once again would take the circle on top of the stack. But if we just go back and instead click on Bring shape to front, it's going to directly go to the top of the stack. Undo this. So here, since we are dealing with the rectangle which is selected, it is only one step to go to be on top. So here, Bring shape to front or Bring shape forward will give us the same result. I'll click on Bring shape to front. We can of course see no difference as such, but I'm going to prove it to you that the rectangle has moved to the top of the stack. The rectangle is already selected. I'll go to Path Operations and then, like before, subtract front shape. If the rectangle is on top of the circle, it should subtract from the circle, right? Let's check that. And it does. Now again, if the rectangle is on top of the polygon or in front of the polygon, it should subtract from the polygon, right? Let's check that too. And it does subtract. So the rectangle is indeed on top of these two shapes. I'm going to select the rectangle once more and try to bring it to the bottom of the stack. So we press and hold Ctrl and then click. Head over to Path Arrangement. And since we have only one step to go to the bottom, we can either select Send Shape Backward or Send Shape to Back. Let's select Send Shape Backward. And now the rectangle is at the bottom. Now it's time to prove that. Now I hope you can understand that the rectangle now is the first shape on the canvas, the circle is second, and the polygon is third. I've already explained in this tutorial what I am going to explain now. We are going to talk about path subtraction. If we take away all these shapes, the empty canvas is considered as 0. Now let's take into account the first shape on the canvas. Photoshop considers this shape as, let's say, A, and the space outside A as -A. So what if we do a subtraction of 0 minus A? We get -A, right? So this area. So in theory, only and only when the rectangle is the first shape on the canvas, we should get this result. If it's not the first shape, we won't get that outcome. So let's find out if it's at all the first shape on the canvas, or in other words, if the rectangle is at the bottom of these two shapes. We go to Path Operations and then subtract front shape. We know that the rectangle is only at the front of this empty canvas. I'm gonna click and the result is -A. Also, since the rectangle is not in front of the circle, it's not going to subtract from the circle nor from the polygon. Hence proved the rectangle is at the bottom of the stack. Next, we're going to look at some additional shape and path options. And for that, I'm going to use a shape, a circle for example, then click on the gear icon. First, we're going to change the path color, which is at present light red. Let's try yellow maybe, or maybe magenta. We can also adjust the thickness of the path. At present we have a thickness of 3 pixels, which looks something like this. We can also have a thinner path, let's say 1 pixel, but you can hardly see the path. 2 pixels is legible, but I use 3 pixels. Next, I'm going to explain unconstrained. When unconstrained is checked, there is no constraint as to how we draw our shape. I'll explain with the ellipse shape tool. So I freely click and drag and we have a horizontal ellipse. I can also draw the ellipse vertically. But now if we want a perfect circle, or in other words, if we want a constrained ellipse, we'll have to press and hold Shift and then draw. But now if I use the circle option, it's going to constrain the shape proportionately. The option here is called circle because right now I'm using the ellipse shape tool. Had I used a different shape tool, let's say a rectangle, the option would have been called square. So now if I try to draw, it's going to be a perfect shape. In our example, a perfect ellipse or a circle. So no matter how big or small I try to draw, it's always going to be a circle. There's no need to press on Shift now. In fact, pressing Shift now will unconstrain the shape. We can also determine a fixed size for the shape. Let's say for width I want 400 pixels and for height 100 pixels. Now if I try to draw the shape, it's always going to be the same size. We can also set a proportion for the shape. For width, I'm going to have 3, and for height, I'm going to have 10. So the ratio of the shape should be 3:10 all the time. I'm going to draw a big rectangle. So this side is 3x and the height is 10x. I'm going to try drawing smaller, but the ratio of its width and height is still 3:10. And it's going to remain the same if I draw an even smaller shape. Next we have from center. Let's draw a shape when it's unchecked. Notice that I'm clicking over here and the final shape is going to align like so. I'll click here to draw a circle and the alignment should be like this. Now I'm going to check from center. If I click here, this should be the center of the shape. And it is. I'll click and draw a circle. This should be the center of the shape. And you get the idea. Next, I'm going to show you align edges. To explain that, I'm using the ellipse shape tool and using only stroke. Align edges is not checked. I'll draw a circle. Then I'll zoom in on it until I see the pixel grid. When align edges is not checked, the outer rim of the shape will be fuzzy. But if I check align edges, you will see that Photoshop will try to make the outer rim more solid or bolder. By solid, I mean the opacity of the outer rim will increase. It's a very subtle change, so pay close attention. I recommend you keep your eye on this spot. Now we're going to look at the options that are not shared by all these tools. First, I'm going to select the rectangle shape tool and then find out the extra options that it has. We have this option for radius to create round corners. First, I'm going to create a shape. And then we can either use this box or these 4 dots to create round corners. I'll go in and hover over one of these dots. You'll see this curve icon, which is when you click and drag. You can also go to an extreme extent, which will curve the corners so much that the shape will become a circle. Of course, you can come back anytime and adjust it. I'll use this box now and type in a value to create round corners. And now when we draw, we have round corners of 40 pixels. We can also round off individual corners one at a time. First, I want to round off this corner. So I'll take the cursor there. When I see the curve, I'll press and hold Alt, click, and then drag. Let's do the same here. Press and hold Alt, click, and drag. We also have the round corners option for the polygon shape tool. Let's draw the polygon. I'll click on this dot and make the corners round. Let's use this box. I'll have 40 pixels again. And there's the polygon with rounded corners. There are other extra options for the polygon shape tool. You can set the value for the number of sides of the polygon here. Like right now, the set value is 6. So the polygon must be a hexagon with 6 sides. Let's try it out. Let's set it at 3. So now the polygon must be a triangle with 3 sides. Now, just like I've shown you with an ellipse, you can also create a polygon with just a click. First, I'll explain the symmetric option, and for that, I'll have to take the help of width and height. Symmetric is unchecked, and I'll set the width to 400 pixels and height to 400 pixels as well. Let's OK that. So the width here is 400 and the height is also 400. I can also prove that over here. But since we didn't check symmetric, the sides of the polygon or the triangle are not the same. I'll click once more. I'll keep the same 400 pixels, but this time I'll check symmetric. So now all the three sides are of equal distance. But to make that happen, the width and height values have slightly changed. The width and height are no more 400 pixels. And as a proof, I can show you this. Photoshop has settled with values which are as close as possible to 400. So the width now is 346.4 pixels and the height is 300 pixels. We are going to skip these two because we already know these two options from our earlier examples. Instead, we are going to check out star ratio. The higher the value, the less it's going to look like a star, and the lower the value, the more it's going to look like a star. So at 100%, we should get a plain polygon. And there it is. I'm going to lower the value to, let's say, 50%. And there you have it. Next, we have smooth star indents, which is active only when star ratio is less than 100%. We already have 50%, which is good. So now let's check smooth star indents. So you can see that the indents over here are so smooth, but here it's not. Now we are going to look at the extra options for the line tool. I'll use a stroke color. So now if I click and drag, this is our simple line. Now I'm going to show you the wet option. But to explain this better, I'll have some fill. We don't need that, but I'll use it. Let's have this magenta. And then we click and drag. But we see no difference. That's because the wet value is 0. I'm going to enter some value, 200 pixels. And now we draw. So this distance between the paths is 200 pixels. Unlike the rectangle shape tool, we can draw these shapes however we want. We can easily draw these rectangles at any angle. Next, we have the custom shape tool. We have some presets for different shapes here. You can choose from any of these, but I'll expand wild animals. Let's scroll down. I want to use this deer shape. I'll press and hold Shift, click and drag. If I don't hold Shift, the shape is not gonna be in proportion. You can also save your own custom shapes as presets. So let's create some random shapes. I'm gonna select the rectangle tool. Here's a rectangle. Then maybe try a vertical shape on top. Grab another shape tool, the ellipse. And here's our beautiful shape. Not only the shape tools, we can also use the pen tool. I'm going to create some random shape with it. I don't know what mess this is, but I want to save this as a preset. For that, we need to select all the 4 shape layers. Go to Edit, and then define custom shape. I'm going to call it Atma, and then OK. We don't need these shapes anymore, so delete. Now let's go to the custom shape tool, click on shape presets, and when we scroll down, we have our custom shape that we just made. Now we can use it any way we like. Now we will discuss about the various modes. All along the tutorial, we have been using this shape mode. And these were the general options for the shape mode. But now we are going to do a comparison of these 3. I'm going to use shape first. Now think of shape as something that is composed of a body and a soul. These yellow pixels is what I call a body. So the yellow stroke is actually the body. I could have also used a fill color, which then also would have been a body. But what is the soul? This red path is the soul. The yellow body resides in the layers panel, so think of the layers panel as the material world. But where does the soul come from? It comes from the spiritual world, which in Photoshop is the paths panel. So here's the soul of the shape, or the path of the shape. I'm going to click off, so we no longer see the path. Then we can select it to see the path again. Now let's explore the path mode, which is only the soul. Also keep an eye over here because the options are going to change. I'm going to draw a circle again. And this time, there's only the soul, no body. So now if I click enter, we have nothing on the canvas. Also, if I bring in the layers panel or the material world, there's no trace of the path or the soul. The shape layer is for this shape. So to access the soul, we'll have to go to the spiritual world. So we go to the paths panel. And here's our path. And this path is from the shape that we already have. Next, we are going to study pixels. The options are going to change here, so keep an eye. Now, unlike the shape mode and the path mode, we first need to create a layer to be able to work in the pixel mode. So since we have a stop sign, let's create a layer first. And this is a good time to tell you the difference between these two layers. This is a shape layer which was automatically created when we created this shape. You can also see this small icon denoting it's a shape layer. On the other hand, this is a simple pixel layer. Now let's get on with the pixel mode. And you can notice that there's no option to choose color from here. That's because it uses the color from the foreground. We have magenta here, so let's go. So this is pixel, which is body without any soul. So we have its body in the layers panel, which is the material world, but it has no soul or path in the spiritual world. This is actually the path which we created a moment back. So this pixel basically has no path. Also, if I click and select both of these, you can see that this path belongs to this shape and this path for this path. So what I'm essentially trying to prove is that this pixel has no path. Now there's another way how you can compare shape and pixels. First I'm going to use pixels. Now I'm going to draw a circle. Now let's go with shape. Draw a circle again. So on the left hand side we have pixels, which is a dead body without any soul, and on the right hand side we have a shape which is a living body with a soul or path. But at first glance they look quite the same. There's no difference, right? I'm going to grab my move tool and prove otherwise. I'm going to click on the pixel and then scale it down. I'm going to do the same thing with the shape. Now let's try to scale up the pixel, which is basically a dead corpse. It has no life in it. I hope you can see how the circle now is so fuzzy. When we had scaled it down, it lost some pixels. And now when we try to scale up, it cannot regenerate pixels, right? Because it's a dead corpse. So it's trying to manage to look big with those few pixels it had. Hence the pixelated, hazy, lackluster look. Now I'm going to try to scale up the shape. And there you go. A shape is a living body. It can regenerate pixels and hence the crisp look. Next, we're going to look at some of the options for the pixels mode. Right off the bat, we have blend modes, which have been extensively discussed in my previous tutorials. I'll link them in the info and description. However, I'll give you a brief run through. First, I'm going to be using the normal blend mode. I'm going to choose another color from the foreground. And then any blend mode. Let's take linear burn for example. Make sure the same layer is selected, otherwise it won't work. And you can see how this overlapping region blends differently with this yellow. So blend mode is how pixels interact with each other. Next we have opacity, which is how transparent or opaque the pixels are. First I'm going to draw with an opacity of 100%, which is totally opaque. So you cannot see through this circle, right? I'm going to reduce the opacity to 45%. And now it's semi-transparent. We can see the black background through it. Next we have anti-alias, or in other words, anti-roughness if you will. First I'm going to draw with anti-alias checked on. And then click it off. You may not see any difference yet, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to zoom in on them. You can see how smooth it is when anti-alias is checked and how rough it is when it's not checked. Now let's study the options under the path mode. First I'm going to bring in the paths panel. Now I'll draw a path. And there we have it in the paths panel as well. Now we can convert this path to a shape. We can do that by clicking here. You can also see a difference in the paths panel. A duplicate of the path has been created. It corresponds to the path of the new shape. This path is actually attached to the shape pixels in the layers panel. And this is just the original path from which the shape has been created. It's not attached to anything. I'm going to click on both of them to show you that both of them are identical. However, if I click and select the original path, you can see that it's really on its own. So I'm going to press and hold Ctrl and then drag. See, no pixels are attached to it. So this is our path attached with the shape. And this is our original path. We can also create a new path layer. The paths panel is empty. Let's quickly draw a path. I'm using the polygon tool. You can see that a path layer has been automatically created due to this polygon, right? But suppose I want to draw another path and I don't want it to be on the same path layer. To create a new path layer, we click on this. The polygon went off because its path layer just got deselected. And this is our new path layer, which is obviously selected. It's empty now, so let's draw a path. And here we have another polygon. Now suppose I want another path, but this time I want it to be on the same path layer as this one. So it's already selected. I'm going to draw another polygon. So here on this path layer, we have this single polygon, and here we have two. We can also delete a path layer if we want. Suppose I want to delete the first one with the single polygon. I'll first select the path layer, and then you can hit either backspace or delete on your keyboard, or you can click on this trash icon. We can also create selections with a path. I'm going to draw a path first, and then we click on this icon. We have the selection, and the path is still there, we just need to select it again. I'll press and hold Ctrl and move the path across, and we can again create a selection out of it. But the one we had before is gone, which brings us to the advanced selection option here. I'm going to create a path afresh, and then click on the selection button. Here you can do many things. First, we have the feather radius, which is at 0 now. I'm going to use it and click OK. So here's our selection with feather 0. I'm going to head over to the layers panel and show you how it looks. Make sure you have an empty layer selected. I'll grab my fill tool and then fill the selection. Ctrl+D to deselect the selection, and you can see how hard the edges are. Now I'll create a new path layer to create another path. We have this polygon, and then we click on Make Selection. This time I'll increase the feather radius to, let's say, 20 pixels. Let's fill in the selection. And you can see that this time the edge is faded or smooth. We have this circular path. Let's go ahead and make a selection out of it. Let's see what anti-alias does. So I'll check it. And here's our selection with anti-alias. So now I can grab the fill tool, which the shortcut is G, and then fill the selection. Next I'll create a path, so a circle again, and then make a selection out of it. This time we uncheck anti-alias. Now we just fill the selection with the fill tool. Deselect the selection, and you will say you see no difference. I know. So that's why I'm going to zoom in on these two. And now you can very well see that with anti-alias, the edge is very smooth, and without anti-alias, the edge is rough. We have this path. We're going to make a selection now. And here we have some operations for the selection. When new selection is checked, a new selection will be created. So nothing extraordinary. We had no selection and this is a new selection, right? Simple. But wait till I make another selection. For that reason, I'm going to create another path and then click on Make Selection. Now this time, if new selection is checked, this old selection will be lost. So this is what new selection is. I'm going to undo these, go to Make Selection, and now I'm going to check Add to Selection. This time, the selection will be added to the existing selection. I'm going to undo these again, Make Selection, and we can go subtract from selection. So this part is going to be subtracted from the existing selection. We go back again, make selection from path. So we have intersect with selection. So essentially we are going to get this intersecting region. We can also create a working path from a given selection, provided that the selection was made from a path in the first place. So I'm going to create a polygonal path, click on make selection, and just to make it interesting, I'll give it a feather of 20 pixels. To show you that the path is still there, I'm going to click on it and maybe move it to the side. I'm going to click off this path, we don't need it anymore. All we need is this selection which is already there. Now to convert this selection into a path, we'll have to click on this. And there we go, a fresh new path. For the next option, I'm going to create a path. And before we use it, we'll have to make sure a layer is selected. Let's go back to the Paths panel. Then we will click on this, which will essentially create a brush stroke along the path. Why is it green? Because the foreground color is green. And why does the brush stroke look like that? To know about that, we'll have to select the brush tool, shortcut for which is B. And then we go to brush settings to see the kind of brush we currently have. So the brush that was selected had all these features with shape dynamics, scattering, etc., whose preview we can see here. So it's just nothing but simply this brush pattern which got slapped onto the path. We can also fill a path with the foreground color. We have yellow as our foreground. Let's draw a path. So now we simply need to click on this icon. Next, I'll show you how to transform a path. We have this circular path. We of course use these transform handles for scaling, rotation, etc. But how do we get our path from one place to another? One way to go about it is that we press and hold Ctrl, click on the path and then move. What the Control key is doing is that it's making use of this tool momentarily. So instead of holding the Control key, we can also use the tools here. The first one is the Path Selection tool. It grabs the entire path and then moves it. It also allows us to perform the normal transform operations. But in order to operate on the level of anchors, we need the next tool. This is called the Direct Selection tool. Now we can select individual anchors, click and move them. That's alright, we just click on yes. And we can go about doing our job. We can also adjust the handles like so. Now if we select all the anchors, it can also act as the Path Selection tool. So now we can move the entire path. Now can we use the regular move tool to do all these with the path? So let's find out. And now when I try to click and drag the path, we can get hold of nothing. That's because the move tool is a tool from the material world and the path is from the spiritual world. So they can't interact with each other. Now let's look at how we can transform a shape. So first I'm going to select the shape mode and then I'll draw a shape. Now since a shape has both a body and a soul, or in other words pixels and path, we should be able to use both the regular move tool and the path tools. So first let's use the path tools which tackle the spiritual realm. So here's our Path Selection tool. We can click and move the path of the shape. Now let's select the Direct Selection tool. And with the Direct Selection tool, we can work with the anchors. Now it's time to check if the Move tool works. Yes, it does. Seems like we can click and select the shape and move it too. Do the usual transformations like scaling and other functions like rotation, you already know that. So this is all I have for today. Make sure to check the other videos. I'll see you next time. Bye.